Now we're starting a new story today, the story of Mary Jones. Now I particularly love this story, and I have a whole lot of stuff. I've got an old book here on the story of Mary Jones. I've researched stuff, I've done it with children, and here we are talking about it again. It's a delightful story. She was born in December 1784. She lived in a humble little grey cottage, the beautiful little Welsh village, and I don't pronounce the name very well, so you who are listening, if you're Welsh, forgive me, Lachfynhel or something like that, near the west coast. I did do this in a school once, and a teacher gave me lessons on how to say it, but of course if you don't say these things regularly, then you forget very quickly. It was a beautiful green valley in the shadow of a mountain. On a clear day from her home, she could sometimes glimpse the sea at a distance. But in the local town, there were fighting, gambling, drinking, and the boys there would have often been regarded as hardened toughs. But the girls, well, they were no angels either. But Mary's parents knew that Mary was different because she had come to learn to trust in God. Life in her valley was simple. Her father, Jacob, was a weaver, and he worked hard to support his wife and his child. But sadly, her father, Jacob, died when Mary was still quite young. But Mary could be counted on to help her mother. She would do the chores, she would scrub the floor, she would feed the chickens, she would cook and help and keep the house tidy. But there was one thing that Mary loved above everything else, and that was going to church. She loved to go to church on a Sunday. All week Mary would look forward to walking the 2 miles with her parents to the little chapel in the village. She would marvel each week as the preacher opened a large black leather-bound book. Amazing Bible stories were told, and Mary would listen intently with great excitement. And every precious word she took in, whether it was Joseph and his brothers, or Daniel in the lion's den, and David and Goliath, she loved to listen. She would think about the stories all week and wait with anticipation for the next week to come. Even after the sermon was over, the preacher had finished, Mary would quietly go to the Bible, that impressive Bible, for a closer look. 2 large words were written in gold on the front, and she couldn't read or write. She guessed the strange squiggles on the front meant Holy Bible. She used to say to herself, "How I wish I could read this book for myself." She loved to learn Bible verses off by heart, and from an early age, Mary knew many of the Bible stories. But she knew there was much of the Bible she hadn't known. One Sunday morning, the preacher gave news that Mary was so thrilled about. A schoolmaster called Mr. Evans and his wife had moved into the area, and 3 weeks later there would be a school opened in their village. Mr. and Mrs. Jones witnessed how delighted Mary was at the opportunity to learn to read and to write, and they knelt down and prayed and thanked God for this opportunity. As the months passed by, it was obvious that Mary was a very excellent pupil. She wanted to take in so much. She wanted to make sense of these strange markings and be able to read for herself. And she wanted especially to be able to read the book in the chapel. She wanted to be able to read it for herself. She listened to everything Mr. Evans taught so that one day she could understand them for herself. Mary loved learning, and her reading skills improved dramatically. The Evans lived in a farm cottage about 2 miles from Mary's home. I'm not going to try and say the name of the farm cottage. Now, Mary used to work hard every day, extra hard, so that she could finish her chores and so that she could get to the farmhouse and to read, because Mr. Evans had very kindly said that he would teach her more in the evenings, but the special thing was the Evans had a Bible. And she was allowed to read the Bible once she could learn to read a little more. Mary eventually read the stories of the Bible, learned the truth of the Bible, and she became a Christian. She put her faith in Jesus Christ at the age of 8 and committed her life to him. Now her life takes a fresh meaning, and there's some amazing things she does in her life. We're going to think about them in the next instalments of our story.